Hey everybody, my name is Ryan. We're here at the Guitar World Canada for a little bit of a special restring video. Not your everyday guitar. This is a 2019 Ibanez Paul Stanley PS1CM. One of only two coming in for Canada this year actually. Just brought it in for a customer, going to be shipping it out, but at his request, swapping it out with his favorite strings. So we're going to do a quick run through on the basics of a restring and how we go about it. Also have a couple different things we'll walk through, some of which we won't be using on this guitar just because it is fresh out of a box. But we'll give you kind of a rundown on if this were maybe an older guitar that needed a bit more of a cleaning, and the process that we would kind of step by step go through to get it done. So something like this, first things first, obviously we got to get the old strings off of it. Clippers, string winder. Normally, we can just pull the strings off, loosen them up, detune the guitar, and then slide everything through. This particular guitar, we've got a quick release tailpiece on here, so we can pop those out. If it had a more standard, Tune-matic style tailpiece, if you will, what we might do just to keep from scratching this beautiful guitar is loosen the strings, clip them, and then carefully pull them through. We might even go through the extra step of putting down a little bit of painter's tape or something to mask the finish, just so we can avoid some scratches. So let's get these strings off. So now we've got the strings all loosened off, and what we're going to do is one by one in this case, just slowly pull them back through the tailpiece. And we're not going to let them drop onto the guitar, we're going to pull them right off the guitar one at a time from the tuning machine as well. And again, just avoiding any risk of scratching or damaging the finish at all. And these guys here from the factory have an extra little bend in there, so it's giving me a little bit of grief. So this is a good example of one of the reasons why we're doing one at a time carefully. That little piece there is catching us up. Wouldn't take long for that to pop itself out, catch the guitar, and leave us with a nice little impression or a scratch somewhere. So I'm just going to put this back through, carefully holding both ends. There we go. So the strings are all off now. There's a couple steps we might take in a more standard situation of a restring where the guitar is going to need to be cleaned up a little bit more. Again, this one's fresh out of a box, so a little bit of case fuzz, and that's about all we need. But if it were your typical used daily guitar, we would be cleaning the fingerboard. We might clean that up with anything as simple as just a little bit of lemon oil or a fingerboard conditioner. For a heavier soiled board, lighter fluid or naphtha would loosen any dirt off. We can also go in certain cases, depending on the material, inlays, if there's finish, anything from a steel wool or synthetic steel wools as well, which are just mild abrasives, loosen up the dirt, clean up the fingerboard, and then again follow it up with some conditioner. Now in a case like this, everything is pretty good. We don't have to scrub this down at all. I will put a little bit of conditioner on there just because we've got the strings off. A couple things we would do, and this would be in any case, especially if we were cleaning it, and especially if you're using steel wool, you want to make sure that the guitar itself is protected, the pickups in particular. If we were doing a scrub down with steel wool, we would cover both pickups. This one here, just taking some extra precautions, even though I'm not cleaning, I'm only conditioning. I just don't want to get any extra oil anywhere, so take the time to cover everything up a little bit. It'll be a good opportunity before or after we do that as well to give the rest of the guitar a little scrub down. Make sure you've got a good polished cloth. A clean microfiber cloth is what we typically use here. You can also use a brush of some sort to get into your bridge components, any little crevices where you can get some dust out. Heavily soiled, you may want to pull some parts off and clean a little further, but in this case, again, we're fresh, so we don't have to worry about it too much. So we're just going to take, you can use a rag, paper towel. I've just got some blue shop towel here. A little bit of conditioner right on here. And just quickly work it in. In certain cases on some boards, you will notice that it's going to absorb it immediately if it's a little dry. If that's the case, you can reapply. You get a feel for it quite quickly. If there's an excess of conditioner or oil, you can easily just wipe it up. This one here doesn't look to be like it's overly thirsty. It will absorb some. We'll get some more of a sheen there. But again, this was just more for the sake that we had the strings off anyways. We might as well give it a wipe down. So leave that. Take a dry portion of the cloth, and then we're just going to buff up and clean any excess. All right, so the guitar is all cleaned up, fingerboard is conditioned. Now we're ready to put the new strings on. So open up our packages. Open them one at a time. Be careful with it because, again, they do spring. You don't want to hit your guitar, scratch it up. You also don't want to get them in your eyes, stuck in your hands. The wound strings aren't so bad, but the plain strings are like little needles. So it's something to be, a little cautious with. So now, down at the bridge tailpiece section, in certain cases, on some guitars, or traditional Les Paul for that matter, you would come up through the back side of that tailpiece, up and over the bridge and on towards the tuners. On the Ibanez, beautifully, we've got a nice simple top load. Drop the string into the slot, pull the ball end up into it to secure it. Keep a little bit of tension on the string just so it doesn't pop itself out. Line it up over the saddle, and then we're going to bring it up to the tuning machine. And there's a variety of different ways that different players will go about changing the strings and measuring the extra that's going to wrap onto the post. Normally what I'll do is I'll pull the strings so that it's taut, not overly tight, just enough tension to get it straight. I'm going to mark and pinch the string where it meets the post it's going into, so I've got that as a reference point. And keeping tension on the rest of it, carefully feed this through, being careful not to scratch the headstock again. Pull that through, and I'm going to leave for the wound strings anywhere from 1 inch to 2 inches, keeping in mind that whatever I've got here is going to wrap around the post, and I want to be nice and neat on here once we get going. So keep a little bit of tension on there, and as that post turns, our string is going to bend, and we're going to get a nice little corner here. That will actually secure the string onto the post nicely. Some players will do locking wraps where they'll double back around and under. Feel free to experiment and try a number of different things and see what works best for you and what's most convenient. In my case, what I will do, I don't get any fancy locks on any wound strings. I'm just going to wind one over top, and then when I come to the full wind, I'm going to make sure the long portion of the string is going to go down below, and then from here on in it should guide itself into a nice neat wrap. I'm keeping tension on the string as I wind it up just to make sure it's not going to slip off the tail piece. And then as I feel it snug up, line it into the nut slot, and then I can release the string and then basically wind it home until we're tuned. Now before we get carried away with tuning up, I'm going to clip this just to get it out of the way and then move it off. That way we've got a nice neat little piece, still sharp, but nothing sticking out to catch our fingers on. So we're down to the last string now. I've gone through, done the rest off camera just to quick everything up a little bit here. But what I do want to show you with the last one, I'd mentioned with our low E string when we put it on that there's a number of ways you can wrap the string and lock it in place. A common place where I do run into where I will use that procedure is on the plain strings. Quite often you might get a guitar where it doesn't want to stay put. The thinner strings do slip a little bit easier. Guitars with trim systems, you may want to use a little bit less wraps but lock it in place just to alleviate any bunching of the string where you're going to run into tuning issues. So in this case here, we're going to follow through basically the same procedure where I've pulled it taut. I've marked my reference point by pinching it through. Now what we're going to do, and I'll try to get my hands out of the way while we show you this. So I'm going to feed the string through. I'm going to take my main section, I'm going to put that little bend into it, just as you see there. Now with the excess portion that usually we would clip off, I'm going to double back around, come underneath, and then lock it up. Now I don't know if the camera can quite catch what's happening there, but I've basically run the loop back through, locked it into place, so that string is going to hold that much tighter. Right? Now on a guitar like this, the tuning machines, we're not going to worry about their quality by any means, but quite often on student model guitars, older vintage pieces as well, the tuning machines may have some worn holes. The string's not going to sit on a nice crisp edge by any means, so that lock can really get everything locked in place and save a lot of headache when it comes down to tuning and tuning stability. So we're going to wind this guy home. Once we've got some tension on that string, I'm going to clip off that excess to get it out of the way. And then all we have left to do now is go through and tune it up. One crucial thing as we're going through the tuning process though is make sure we stretch the strings. If we were to just tune it up, go play, the guitar is not going to stay in tune whatsoever. So we got to get things to settle both on the bridge section in the tuning machines and then break in the strings a little bit, right? So it would be as simple as, you know, our A string, just as an example, if we're in tune right now from a fresh set, I haven't stretched this as of yet, give that a little bit of a pull, right? Don't go too crazy, you don't want to break your new strings, but you want to get them settled in, right? So we probably drop, half tone to a tone, lower strings, we'll drop a little further, but you'll notice every time you give it a bit of a stretch, you have to tune up less and less. And that's going to make your everyday playing life a lot more tolerable in terms of tuning stability. Right? That's the end of that. We would go through, wipe down the rest of the guitar, get our fingerprints off there, and then send this on its way. Keep an eye out for some more videos, unboxing stuff, new products. We're going to do some more tutorials on some of the repair procedures and little things, gear demos and whatnot. You can check us out through Facebook, Instagram, but be sure to check out our website at theguitarworld.com, where we'll have some beautiful inventory, a lot of selection for you to choose from through there. And if you have any questions, you can reach through our website, send us an email, chat function, whatever it may be. Get in touch, say hello. Thanks.